He wants to increase rent collections. Right now, nearly a quarter of the tenants are delinquent in their payments. Also, he wants to lease land to developers and then let them build thousands of apartments. Half of those apartments would then have affordable housing. He also wants to bump parking fees from $25 a month to as much as $150 a month. And this is obviously not an issue that is just confined to New York City. There are a lot of communities that have affordable housing or have public housing, and New Rochelle is one of them, Mr. Mayor. And I'm curious because the public-private partnership that the mayor is looking towards, give some of the land on some of these lots to private developers, let them build new units, and in exchange they refurbish the units that are already there. You've got a public-private partnership when it comes to public housing in New Rochelle. Does it work well?
In our case, it's worked very well. We've taken down mid-rise structures that almost everyone agrees were a planning disaster, most especially for the residents of those units. And they've been replaced with townhome-style affordable housing, which has been much more appealing for the folks who live there and also more fully integrated into the fabric of the surrounding neighborhood. And that really couldn't be achieved except through a public-private partnership.
You couldn't afford to do it yourself? The city couldn't do it?
There's no way. And you know, the challenges are overwhelming because you have aging housing stock that needs enormous investment in terms of maintenance just to keep it livable. And at a certain point, those investments don't make any sense. So you need a new housing product. And very often government cannot handle it on its own, and so it's through a public-private partnership that you actually serve the residents of public housing and ensure that your affordable housing stock can be preserved going forward.
This is similar, Dominic, to what the mayor wants to do with new housing development. He wants to basically let developers build new complexes in exchange for affordable housing. Is it passing your smell test about fixing the current stock of low-income housing?
Absolutely not. Because oftentimes we've heard these types of arrangements before, and when it's all said and done, it sounds great, and when it's time to cut the ribbon, but when the actual tenants move in, somehow it never seems to work out exactly the way that it's supposed to. The problem with the Housing Authority of New York City, and I say this as a proud graduate, if you will, of the projects, mismanagement. There's been mismanagement for 30 years.
What kind of mismanagement?
From the top down. They can't ever seem to get a board or a director where things are working. And there's tremendous mismanagement. You talked about one of the things in terms of the repairs that need to be done. So I salute the mayor's idea. I know that they can't do in New York City what you could do in New Rochelle because yours is on a much smaller scale. But no matter who the mayor is, they can't seem to get it together in terms of management at the Housing Authority. That's the problem, where billions of dollars are wasted.
Scott, the plan also includes increasing rent payments and then trying to crack down and do better at collecting that rent. That can be difficult for the people who are living in those spots. I mean, I know obviously you get a rent, you're supposed to pay the rent. That's part of the deal. But I mean, you're talking about people who are in affordable housing or are in public housing, which means they're not exactly of terrific means to begin with.
Yeah, sorry, no sympathy here. You have a place, you owe the rent. So, I mean, going to Dominic's point, they should have been doing this all along. I mean, this is what they should be doing. If a quarter of the people aren't paying, they should be paying. I mean, it's part of the deal. You have a pretty good place to live, or at least a place to live, in some cases not so. But I want to go back to the mayor's point because it's really true. This has to be a multi-year, decade-wise effort at piece by piece by piece. It's not a grand, I mean, each little part of it has to be done with combinations of HUD money, the federal money, with private developers and what have you. So these grand plans sound good, but I mean, they've just wasted so much time in New York City on this effort.
How does it work in Rockland County? You said there's no public housing in Rockland County? There's just affordable housing?
The big trouble is affordable housing. I've got to go back and look at public housing, but the real issue is affordable housing, making it affordable. We created thousands of affordable units, and that's units that the middle class and the lower middle class can afford throughout Rockland, doing the same thing that the mayor did in New Rochelle, which is combining HUD, and it's complicated. Private investors, HUD, the state housing authority has to be involved. Everything has to be documented. But if you don't do it year by year by year, then you fall behind. And when you fall behind, it's a daunting task, and I think that's what's happened in the city.
These public housing complexes in the city, these are the groups of like 20, 25-story buildings that you see grouped throughout the city. Are those models just dated? Is it time to do away with those and look for a different model? And is there enough real estate in the city to do that?
They are dated models. Most planners would agree that having sort of a tower in the middle of the park with all common areas and no sense of individual ownership is not the best way to design affordable housing. Whether you have the flexibility in a fully built out, dense city like New York to substantially change that, I think, is an open question. In the suburbs, there is a greater degree of flexibility. So I'm not going to make any judgments about whether New York City can do that. But as a general matter, I think most affordable housing builders and most planners, if they could step into a time machine and go back 50 years, would design affordable housing in a very different way.
Andrew, I'll put it to you this way. Why would you, I know people need housing and affordable housing, but why would you put people with similar bad issues as it relates to the family structure unit and put a bunch of people in one unit, all with devastating issues and devastating problems, and expect for positive results to come out of that? What happens is a cycle of poverty all over, all over, all over again. And until we start to deal with this, it's just going to continue.
Let me just point out something. I think that's a great point, and it's why, and Scott also makes a great point, affordable housing is not any one thing. There are a million different models, and at any one time, all of those models may be on display in any kind of community. And one of the most promising models, I think, is building affordable housing on an inclusionary basis in conjunction with market rate housing. So whether it's 80-20, which provides some entitlement to tax credits, or 60-40, or in the case of New Rochelle and some other communities, a 10% requirement that attaches to any kind of private development. That way you get an increase in the number of affordable units without the concentration that Dominic is referring to, and you can set the affordability level at any point along the scale depending on what kind of subsidies you're drawing from.
And we will continue to follow this as it goes from the embryonic stage into actual action in New York City. We're going to take a break on our phone. When we come back, looks like the plan for a state monitor of the East Ramapo School District is in big trouble, and all you have to do is look north to Albany for someone to blame.